When you receive a message, let's say a WhatsApp message or a text message, how soon should you reply? Many people think if a person doesn't reply for 3 days, if I don't reply for 3 days, then I am busy and focused. But if my friend doesn't reply to me for 3 hours, they are ghosting me, ignoring me, and clearly don't care about our relationship. Similarly, they say that if a person speaks to God, it's a spiritual practice of prayer. But if God speaks to a person, there is something wrong with that person. So there's some inconsistencies in our lives. There's some double standards in our lives that often applies. And it might be a funny joke or funny two jokes, but I think it leads to a serious question. When we pray, who do we really talk to? Does God need at all our prayers? You might be surprised, but this question is not new. It doesn't only belong to our contemporary world of science and modernity or post-modernity. This question was articulated, or at least alluded to, by Maimonides. Cosma, you referred to his work, The Guide of the Perplexed, in your Dvar Torah, when you said that the system of animal sacrifices in Judaism was a way of slowly diminishing them. That's the Maimonides' idea, a way of weaning people away from idolatry and pagan practices. Before Torah, you said, sacrifices were spontaneous and uncontrolled. Anyone could bring sacrifices as often as they wanted, wherever they wanted, and in a way, whatever they wanted. The Torah text limits it to only one place on earth. Only a select small group of priests could perform it, and only at particular appointed times. So from that perspective, that's completely right. Torah text exists to limit and reduce and probably slowly stop it. But Maimonides, in the same text, goes even further. To illustrate his point, he says the following, or writes the following in his Guide of the Perplexed. He says, to ban animal sacrifices in the past, 2,500 or 3,000 years ago, in those days, would have made the same impression as if a priest would make today, if somebody would say today to you that we should not pray to God, nor fast, nor seek divine help in times of trouble, that we should serve in thought alone and not through any action. For Maimonides, that's a good illustration of the point, because for us it is unheard of to serve God only in thought and contemplation. But I think there's something deeper going on for Maimonides. By giving this explanation, I think he did something clever. He planted a seed of thought in our minds, and maybe God doesn't need our prayer in the same way that God doesn't need animal sacrifices. Prayer, the purpose and aim of prayer, is not any kind of performative piety, but a way of challenging ourselves or our views. Perhaps the purpose of religion is to be a moral mirror for our society. I think most of us can recognize this point from our ordinary life. An apology means very little if the behavior never changes. A public gesture of speech can look or sound impressive, but if it doesn't lead to a real change, if it hides selfishness, dishonesty, or indifference, it will remain empty, and people notice that. Today we began reading of a new book of the Torah. In English it's called Leviticus, because it mostly focuses on the priests, descendants of the tribe of Levi. and the service of the ancient temple. Much of the book describes the korbanot, or sacrifices, that the ancient Israelites were commanded to perform. Yet the Hebrew word for sacrifice, korban, I think reveals something meaningful. Korban, this word, comes from the root karov, or leakriv, to draw something near. It seems that the purpose of sacrifice was to bring people closer to something. To sacrifice is the root of this word is to draw near, maybe to God or perhaps to one another. It was not a way to balance the scales after wrongdoing, not to cover one's bad behavior. And I think this approach is deeply embedded in Jewish thought. Isaiah saw people who brought offerings to the temple while neglecting poor and exploiting others. And he spoke about it. He spoke about it in God's name with anger and pain. How can you say your prayers? What need do I have? Or how can you do your sacrifices? What need do I have of all your sacrifices? Isaiah asks. God does not desire rituals performed by hands stained with crime. No amount of performative piety can compensate for cruelty and injustice. No offering can sanctify a corrupt life. The Midrash in Leviticus Rabbah takes this point in a different way, but uses the same, uses even sharper language. Let no person say, I will go and do ugly and immoral things, then I will bring a bull with much meat and offer it as a sacrifice on the altar, and God will forgive me. The Midrash says, for people who think like that, God will not have mercy on such a person. Religion, in this text, consistently is a demand to face our lives with radical honesty. After the destruction of the temple in the year 70 of the Common Era, animal sacrifices ceased. Because the temple was destroyed, there was no means to do it. But the religious need to draw near to God did not disappear. 3 daily sacrifices performed in the temple were reimagined and became 3 daily prayers. In the place of bulls and rams came the offering of words, the labor of the heart, as rabbis of Talmud describe it, the discipline of prayer. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel captured this powerfully when he wrote, prayer is not a substitute for sacrifice. Prayer, he writes, is sacrifice. True prayer is not a thoughtless recitation and certainly not performance. In genuine prayer, Heschel says, we try to surrender our vanities, to burn our insolence, to abandon bias, dishonesty, and envy. In Heschel's vision, when we pray, we are supposed to get rid of our bias, dishonesty, and envy and seek to recover our capacity for truth, kindness, and justice. That's an extraordinary spiritual vision. Prayer only matters when it changes us. Prayer is only real when it makes us less arrogant, less cruel, less self-absorbed. Prayer only works when it opens us to our inner voice of conscience, to compassion, and to the presence of God in other human beings. This vision might seem deeply theoretical to us today and not applicable in practice. After all, today Jewish people feel bereaved of safety. Many of us live with an acute awareness of anti-Semitism and real threats that we face. How can we speak about seeing the human faith in others when so many others do not see human face in us? Well, Isaiah lived through wars much more brutal than we have today. Many texts in our tradition have been written by people lived through the most terrible circumstances. When Maimonides was young, his birthplace, Cordoba in Spain, was conquered in 1148. And they forced the Jewish community to choose between converting to Islam, death, or exile. So his family chose to leave Spain. And this is how he ended up in Egypt, where he wrote all these beautiful manuscripts and works. Heschel was arrested for his public position against the war in Vietnam. Many great sages in our history had the lived experience of barbarism, anti-Semitism, war, and oppression, and yet they chose to preach about compassion, about coexistence, about seeing God in other people, and moral honesty. What then is the meaning of religion in today's world? Perhaps it's not so different from what it was in the past. Religion still exists to close the gap between what we believe and how we live. It exists to face hypocrisy. It exists to call us nearer to God by calling us back to one another. Even when Jews faced anti-Semitism on unprecedented level today, we must, our religious responsibility is always remember to see God's image in other people, in all people, not only in us. Even when there is a genuine threat to Jewish people coming from radical ideologies, we must fight to protect the right of public gathering and prayer for all, not only for us. The main focus of the book of Leviticus is animal sacrifices, but its message is not about slaughtering animals or ancient barbaric customs. It's about honesty. Why do I think people need prayer and religion today? To make us more honest, more compassionate, more responsible for one another. Why do I think people need God today? The answer that I found was actually came from Twitter. One religious leader came with this phrasing, and I don't know the origin of it. So why do I think people need God today? To remind us that we are not. We don't know what the future holds, but we can at last remain human when we face it. Shabbat Shalom, and may we have peaceful and meaningful Shabbat and week and month and life. We are going to conclude our service now, but before we conclude, Cosmo, I want to say how much, and I hope you saw in people's eyes how proud they are of you. You've achieved so much. You led the service beautifully, and you gave incredible Dvar Torah. And this is just a token, but I hope you will use it throughout your life. This is the prayer book, Machzor Ruach